My name is Brian, and as you can hear, I am not speaking Portuguese. I wish I could be, so apologies. I will try to speak slowly. My colleagues in New York tell me I speak too fast for a New Yorker, which means you have a problem. So if I get a little too fast, just wave me down, because I can get excited about this topic. My role at Google is at the Zoo, which is an internal creative think tank where we work with a lot of our largest brands in order to try to help them come up with the best digital work possible. And my specific role on that team is as a creative strategist. So what that means is I look at all of Google's data, and that's a lot of data, as well as data from all kinds of third parties, and my job is to try to understand what creatively can we draw from this information. So data is very commonly used at Google and everywhere else to make very hard decisions, to do media purchasing, to determine where we should be placing advertisements. My job is to look at it from a totally different perspective. What is that data telling us about human beings? About what they care about, what they're nervous about, what they're excited about, maybe what are some trends on the horizon. So what I'm going to discuss today is how I use these tools and this data, and my team works to try to pull those stories out and to try to allow brands and agencies to come up with maybe even new business models, new product lines, work within the product lines they have. How can I sell them more efficiently? How can I tell better stories? All those kinds of things. And also, importantly, to look for surprises. And we're going to see a lot of surprises today, I think. Now, usually I am working with a client and I have not very much choice over who that client is, but for this, I got to pick any topic I wanted. So I decided to do something fun and something that I like, and it just happened to work out that it is very hot here in Brazil compared to where I came down from. So it works out nicely for me, which is rosé wine. So we're going to look at rosé wine, and we're going to look through many data lenses about what can we find about this product if I was a rosé producer or if I was an agency who's trying to help a rosé producer. And I'm going to walk you through several tools, but this is not going to be a tool training. This is going to be a theory talk. So a few of these tools, just a few, you would have to work with a Google team to get access to. But the vast majority of what I'm going to show you this afternoon at lunch, you can go play around yourself online. So I'll talk through that. The first thing I did, and by the way, the order in which I'm presenting this doesn't matter. You could come at this from any angle, and you'll get to the same conclusions. The first thing I did, though, was I said, let's just look at some demographic data on rosé wine drinkers. And what I found was something that surprised me. I thought the average wine drinker would look just like red wine. Interest area is 35 to 55. Now, we don't have demographic data on search, but we do on things like YouTube and shopping behavior. So that's where this comes from. Rosé, 18 to 35. So if I was thinking with a traditional Google data brain, which we do a lot internally there, I would say, okay, great, let's think about where I'm going to place my advertisements and where I'm going to place my stories that will hit this demographic. What are the properties we should be going to? And then I'm done, and I go to lunch. But what I want to do is I want to think a little bit more about what can I do with this information. So suddenly, 18 to 35-year-olds, to me, that's a very different wine drinker than I thought, and I need to actually rethink from where, using this data, from where am I going to place the work I've already done, to how am I actually speaking to the people that are interested in my imaginary rosé label. So that's our first implication, and I'm going to go through how we do that. One thing that we know, and my team happens to do a fair amount of kind of anthropological work around the culture of digital. How are people using their phones? How often do people check their email? Those kinds of things, and what does it mean? And one thing that we know to be completely true is that people go online to grow and to learn. So for example, I bet every single one of you in this room has gone online at some point to learn something, to read a review, to figure out a recipe that you wanted to cook tonight. Should you buy the new iPhone? How do you speak English and Portuguese, as a random example? And for that, we see behavior that goes very deep. We see people looking at things that you would never imagine that they cared about. And my example I'll give you here is we sometimes have clients that say, no one cares about my product, no one goes deep, I sell paper towels. What I recommend that you do is go to Amazon.com, look up any paper towel brand, and read through the thousands of passionate reviews about these paper towels, where people talk about the absorbency or it doesn't tear very well, and realize that no matter what brand or product you're working with, people care and they want to learn. So the kind of first version of that with digital culture was going online to something like Khan Academy or YouTube or Code Academy, where you say, I want to learn something, there's some classes you can take or something you can read or a video you can watch, and you're learning from that. Where we are now, technologically speaking, is our technology is learning from us and in turn helping us to learn. So if you use Waze, Waze starts to know if you're driving to work or not. You don't have to tell it. And when it recognizes that you're driving to work, it knows that you like to stop at a coffee shop. And so it can start giving you information. You can feed it information. So you're learning, and the technology is learning from you. Where we're headed, in an area that Google is focusing quite a bit of attention on, is machine learning. So this is a video of a robot. They're trying to make a better vacuum, the little Roomba-type vacuums, and it's learning its room here on its own, no programming. I feel bad for this woman. I'm like, she can just go home if they're making a vacuum. But what it's trying to do is understand without any human interaction. So what does this have to do with our imaginary rosé producers? One thing I can do is I can go and I can take a look at what are the most common searches. So I can use Google Trends to do this. I could work with a team. And I did that. And this is what I saw. People don't generally censor themselves when they're trying to learn online, learning about brands, products, industries. So most closely associated with rosé wine, you have rosé. You have rosé wine, great. Rosé wine brand, which is making sense. But then you have pink wine. So I don't know what it's called, but I know what it looks like, and I'm trying to learn something about it. Then you have rosé, and then you have rosé wine. So this is, I don't know how to spell it, but I know how it sounds to my ear. Rosé champagne, rosa wine, white wine, and this is my favorite because it's the closest to how it sounds to my ear, which is rosé. So no one gets embarrassed about searching for something online. They're just going to go with it. And I know this to be true because I've never asked anyone to show me their last year of searches and had them say yes. We all go online and look for things. Maybe I don't know much about it, but I don't feel uncomfortable. And if I'm working with a wine brand, let's think about this. Wine is one of those things that people can be a little embarrassed about. I know when I sit down in a restaurant and I'm looking through the wine list and I see something I can in no way pronounce, I'm just not going to order that wine. I'm not even going to try to say it. I'll go for something, I'll say Pinot Noir, yeah, I can say that. Not online. Online, I'm okay looking at these things. So, if I'm a brand and I'm looking at this data, what do I do with this? What's the practical application? I should be there for all of these search terms. I should be there for people who are not embarrassed to try to learn about something new. I should have an entire message for the people who don't understand rosé wine, who don't drink it all the time. This is a totally new market for me. And I want to be there in a way that makes them feel smart for looking. I don't want to embarrass them for saying rosé. Why not? I want them to come and learn. So I can be the brand that does that. The next thing I looked at was, what are the most common questions? And one of the ways that you can do that is just go to Google and start typing in questions with your brand and let it autofill. So autofill is if you're typing in World Cup tea and it says World Cup tickets, World Cup travel, where it tries to anticipate what you're searching. What that's doing is it's using an immense amount of data. It's updated every day for the most common questions and search terms that are happening around that keyword. So what I would recommend, and what I tell all the brands I work with to do, just take half an hour, type in every question you can think of, and put your brand's name in there. If it's Audi, why does Audi? Does Audi? Will Audi? Can Audi? And see what that autofill is that comes in, and you suddenly get a sense of all the questions people are really asking about your brand. Now in this case, we have some really interesting ones. We have things that aren't very surprising. How to make it, what is it, how to serve it, but then how long does it last? What does it taste like? How to drink rosé wine, which is an interesting question. You put it in a cup and drink it, but it's a question that's being asked. These are my two favorites though. See if I can get the laser pointer to work here. Kind of there. How many calories in a large glass of rosé wine? And that's question number one, but the better question, which I'm assuming comes later at night is how many calories in a bottle of rosé wine. So now it's a party. And also, if it's I'm drinking a whole bottle of wine night, just don't worry about the calories. Just go with it. That said, I am learning a lot here, right? These are some really basic questions that people don't know about my product. So this gives me tons of opportunity to, again, be there. I can be there with content, I can be there with advertising, I can be there with stories to help people to understand my product, and then I'm a trusted brand. I'm not making fun of you for this, I'm not even not there. I'm there, and I'm helping you kind of get into the world of what we do. And like I say, sometimes I hear things like, well, our brand would just never have this. You will always find questions about any brand you work with, I promise you. So given that, I looked for the top video most viewed for rosé. So it's rosé, but he couldn't get the proper thing. So this is Topher. He's a host, in quotation marks, I don't know why. I'm not trying to make fun of Topher. I'm sure he is a wonderful person and a wine expert, but this is not a fantastic quality video for the most viewed video about rosé wine, right? We could probably do better. And the way that I found this, pardon me, the way I found this was simply going to YouTube, typing in the keyword, and then there's a button that says filter. Click that and you can filter by so many different metrics. One of them is view count. So I do this for anything I ever work on. I go in and I say, what's the brand, or the product, or the industry? I filter, most viewed, and I get to see what are the most viewed videos. And often it is brand videos, very highly produced, beautiful brand videos, but just as often, it's guys like Topher. That is an enormous opportunity for me as a brand. I can be there for all those questions that I could see were being asked, for all those searches, and I can be an amazing content producer for people that are interested. So that brings us to our second implication. Fill in the gaps and go deep. So fill in the gaps is find all of those questions. Look for places where there is no content. Go to YouTube, go to search, go anywhere you can, see where there's nothing there, and then be the brand that is there for that. Go deep is a slightly different piece. One of the brands that we worked with some years ago now was Dyson vacuum cleaners. So I don't know if you know Dyson, they're very expensive, very technologically advanced vacuum cleaners that look really cool. They look like sports cars. And one of the things that we found with them is that some of their most popular content they ever produced, definitely not their commercials, it's their engineers would produce a very pretty, like very well shot video of how the vacuum cleaner engine, I guess that's what it's called. I don't even know what, is it an engine? The vacuum cleaner engine works, how it actually draws so much air, and it shows how like the things move. And these are 8-9 minute videos that have millions of views. So is that gonna be a massive audience? No. But is that gonna be an audience that really cares about your product? Yes. Anyone who sits and watches a 9-minute long video about a vacuum cleaner is probably going to tell their friends, like, you've got to get this vacuum. I know so much about it. It's amazing, let me tell you. So that's fine. Not everything has to be super broad. Sometimes just going deep with those clients that are interested is as valuable. So next, these are all public tools you can use. This is Google Correlate, what we're looking at. So what are they doing with it? What I did here was I took a look at the term rosé wine, and I saw all of the search terms that are most closely correlated with that. And if you're not familiar with Correlate, it is a tool that lets you see any word that has a very similar search pattern over time to what you put in. So if I put in ice cream, I will find that swimming pools are very highly correlated with ice cream. Doesn't mean that you're searching for them at the same time, it just means interest peaks at the same time for both of those things. In this case, rosé wine, I get best crab, peeling, like a sunburn, Oakley store. So we're getting summer here, right? We're getting sunglasses, we have sunburn, and then there's gonna be some data that you could just toss. To ride, I don't know, don't care. But then I got make simple syrup, okay. How to make simple syrup, and if I showed you the list of about 100 words that kept coming up. If you are unfamiliar with simple syrup, I don't know what the translation would be, but it's just sugar dissolved in water so that you can make cocktails without having to stir the sugar for 10 minutes. And it's simply a cocktail ingredient. So I thought that was interesting that that was so tightly correlated and so many times with rosé wine, which I don't think of as a cocktail. So I went back to the drawing board. I just searched for rosé wine cocktails, and I got about 10 million results. So what I learned was there are tons of chefs, magazines, food blogs that in the summertime put out these recipes to make punches and all this other types of like really, really delicate cocktails using rosé. As a side bonus to my job, sometimes I learn things that are very useful to me personally, so I highly recommend one called the Black Rose. It's a bottle of rosé wine, some shots of vodka, several limes, simple syrup, and about a pound of blackberries, and you mash it all up. It's really good, and I have to do all the hand motions to remember all the ingredients, but when I do, I remember it, and it's fantastic. So, interesting for me, but what do I do as a brand if I'm actually trying to use this? Well, I realized that rosé isn't just a wine, it's an ingredient, and I can play with that. So even if we just stopped here, we've already learned quite a bit about the nature of our product, the age range of the people that are interested in it, the kinds of questions that they have, the way it's being used that maybe if I were a winemaker or an agency working with one, I might not think of. I've already got plenty of fodder here to come up with entirely new campaigns, to think directionally about where I want to go, to come up with some really unique and creative ideas, on top of my day-to-day media campaign, my usual work that I do. But we're not going to stop here. We're going to look at two more implications. So this is Google Trends. I assume that many of you are familiar with it. If not, definitely play with it. It is a tool that was built to do nothing with what we are going to do now, but it's a great tool creatively if you use it differently than it's meant. So what I'm seeing here is, this is year over year, and this is searches for rosé. And this is just US data, and I'll explain why I have just US here. We're going to see global data after this. But what you notice is June, this kind of big, fat kind of spikes that come up. That's like May, June, July, August, and then it kind of drops off. That surprises me not at all. If I'm making rosé wine, I know it's a summer drink. I know that that's when I'm popular. But then I saw every December, this additional spike. And it's sharp, and it goes up really fast, and then drops off a cliff. And I said, I don't get that. So I thought, maybe it's Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, maybe that's the issue. So maybe it's just summer. So that's why I said, well, let me just look at US-only data. Maybe that'll probably go away. It did not go away. So then I got really curious. I did a lot of searching. I narrowed Google Trends down to just December. I looked at the search terms that were associated, and it hit me after a little while. It probably took me longer than it should have. Very likely many of you have already figured it out just by thinking about it. And what it is rosé champagne, well, not rosé champagne, sparkling rosé is very popular, especially amongst younger people, for New Year's Eve. The reason for that is twofold. It's much cheaper than champagne. Champagne is $50 a bottle, $60, $12. And sparkling rosé just tastes better to some palates. Champagne can be a little bitter. Sparkling rosé is delicious. It's like a juice. So, great. If I'm the agency, I can go to my rosé producer and say, you now have a whole second campaign. You have a whole new time zone. We are going to do something amazing every December to get people to use this for their New Year's Eve parties. That, by the way, is why it drops off so hard. Like, people get interested. By January 2nd, no one cares about rosé until June again. That's fine. I'll take it. But this is the other piece that popped up on this same page. And this one completely confounded me. What you're looking at is the geographic locations where rosé is most commonly searched. Number one there, I know it's a little small on this slide, but that is the United Kingdom by a mile. The United Kingdom does twice as much searching for rosé wine as any other country in the world. That really surprised me. You'll notice, if you're looking at that, that France is not on there anywhere because French people never search for wine because they already know. That's the take. There's no French people here, right? No one's French. Seriously, they never search for it. But United Kingdom, I spent hours for this project trying to figure out what was going on, trying to use the data. I was going to all the Google internal only tools. I was pulling mounds of things. I had numbers everywhere, and it just wasn't clicking. So I took a break, and I realized that where I work, downstairs from our offices, very conveniently, is a place called Chelsea Wine Vault. Chelsea Wine Vault is an enormous and very well-respected wine store in Manhattan, and they know their stuff. They are experts. So I said, why don't I just take the elevator down and ask someone? Shocking, right? One of the things that we don't do very well at Google is ask someone. We always assume that the data's got it, our algorithms can figure it out. Sometimes you need to be a little more human once you've got some data going and start poking around. So I did, and I went down there, and there was a man at the counter, and I explained what I was doing. I said, look, I'll buy a nice bottle of wine, but if you can help me out, do you have any idea why the United Kingdom is so into rosé wine? Scotland in particular, just FYI. You can drill down to the city. If you ever want to sell rosé, go to Glasgow, apparently. That said, he said, no, I'm not really sure, but there's a guy standing behind him in this immaculate suit, and he had this very nicely trimmed beard, and he turned around with a British accent and said, I can tell you why. And that is the last British accent I will do today, I promise. But he was amazing. He said, here's why. The drinking age in the UK is 18, unlike the US, where it's 21. And kids really start to drink at about 15 or 16. And what gets marketed to them are these cans of very sweet, fruity flavored, kind of malt beverage, beers that have fruit in them, and that's what they drink. And then when they get a little older, they want to seem a little more sophisticated. They don't want to be bringing that six-pack of fruit beer to a party. Red wine maybe is a little too expensive, a little too challenging. White wine the same, but rosé wine is that middle step. If you buy an inexpensive rosé wine, they tend to be sweet. They're very easily drinkable. You throw it in a fridge for 30 minutes, and you could drink a tumbler of it if you wanted to. That's why. And I said, that is amazing. Thank you for that. But I don't trust him 100%. I thought it was a good opinion. So I said, I need to back this up a little bit. I work with many Google folks in the UK, in the London office. So I actually got in touch with a few of the guys I know there who have teenage kids. And I asked, hey, is this a thing? Is this true? And one of them said, oh, it's absolutely, they both said yes, the two that I talked to. The one that really hit it, though, he goes, oh, yeah, my daughter's 16, and every once in a while she asks me to bring home a bottle of rosé so her and her friends can sit around and have it. And I was like, my dad is a different dad than you. If I, at 16, asked him to bring me home a bottle of wine, it would have gone very badly. But there, it apparently worked out okay. And so, great. Now I have a couple of new insights. There's a new rosé moment, which is that New Year's Eve spike that is almost as high an interest level as summer. Granted, it's shorter, but boy, is it powerful. And a new rosé drinker to be tapped, which does not mean that we want to market to 16-year-olds. That is bad. What we do want to do, however, is market to the 18-year-old or 19-year-old or 20-year-old who is interested in start moving away from maybe sweet drinks and into wine, maybe some more refined things. We can be there for them. That happens to wrap back very neatly and nicely to those questions we were seeing earlier, the types of searches we were seeing. So now I'm getting a nice picture of something I can do as a rosé producer beyond my day-to-day marketing. So, Google Trends again. How do we compare? Often, and I am as much an offender of this as anyone, when you're working with a brand and you're under pressure and the brand has a lot of very deep challengers and they're really tight competition, you can kind of lock in and just look. So if I'm looking at sports cars, so let's go back to my Audi example. If I'm looking at Audi and they have a sports car they're launching, then all my data is on Audi buyers, sports cars, BMW sports cars, Mercedes sports cars, and I'm done. That's the competitive set that I look at because I've got to get information. We have to come up with creative ideas. We got to get those out the door. But if you can pause and just widen the lens a little bit Just open up and say, well, what's kind of like a sports car, but different? I mean, I should be looking at pickup truck buyers. I don't know, I should be looking at speedboat purchases. There are things you can learn just a step or two removed from what you usually do when you're looking at your competitive set that I think can be really powerful. So let's look at one. And Fung, I don't know where you are. I was told just earlier, he saw my presentation and he said, why did you do wine? It's like Brazil's a beer country. And I said, don't worry, we'll get there. And we do. That red line is craft beer searches. So if I go back, it looks like rosé wine's doing pretty good year over year, right? That's a nice graph. It's up and to the right like we like. As soon as I put in craft beer, crushed, which is good news. That means that given there's so much interest and so much activity going on in the craft beer world, I'm going to go steal all their ideas as a rosé producer. I'll borrow them. I won't steal them. But I'm going to look at what they're doing right and see if maybe something can match with what I'm doing and save me the effort of having discovered it on myself. So this is in the US. I got here on Monday, and so I've been able to explore your local craft beer scene quite a bit, and it's fantastic and growing. In the US, it's enormous. And so I just looked online. I looked at ads, I looked at videos, I looked at apps, just to say, what's the craft beer world doing? Because they're clearly doing something right. Well, first of all of their ads, and I will challenge you to find a craft beer ad, at least from the US, that does not do this. It features the real people who make the beer, who work at the breweries. It's not like people playing volleyball on the beach. It's the people who actually make the beer, and it feels real. It feels authentic. They tell you their real message. The second thing I found out is that craft brewers realize in the US that they cannot compete with an Anheuser-Busch when it comes to marketing spend. You're never gonna win. You're never gonna have a Super Bowl ad as a microbrew. But what we can do is team together. So you see this at the three hats. These microbrews are coming together and throwing festivals together. They're helping each other market because they figure no one drinks the same beer every day, all the time, forever. People who are into craft beer like to try many beers, so why don't we all just join forces? So I've got real people, I've got join together rather than compete against, and the third thing I found was they are doing really smart stuff with technology, especially for younger folks. This is an app that is fantastic. It's called Untapped. Several microbrewers worked with an agency to build this. What it allows you to do is go have a beer at a bar, you love it, all you do is take a photo, which is what you see there, of the label. To date, it has never not found a beer that I've tried it on. It's very good, and it'll find your beer, you can rate it, make a couple comments, put the place, it knows via maps where you are, say how much it cost, and then you have a friend circle. So I have a good friend who lived in Seattle for a while. He now lives in San Francisco. Huge beer nerd. I don't know if beer nerd is a term here, but he is a beer nerd. And I'm happen to be going to Seattle next week, and I can just go on this app and know everywhere that he went that he had beers that he ranked 5 stars that he loved, and I can go try those beers too. So smart use of technology. So we learned a lot here from craft brewers. I can take bits and pieces of that, I can build things in, I can say none of that is useful to me, but maybe it will be down the line. This is an area where I'm learning outside of my super direct competitive set. So that is implication 5. Let's learn from our cousins. We always have to learn from our brothers and sisters, but sometimes it's good to open up a little bit and learn from our cousins. So, we looked at a lot of data, came to a lot of conclusions. We'll distill it. Since we already had beer and wine, I figure let's throw in whiskey. We'll make it a party. Here's the core things that I hope you guys take away today. And I'm happy to speak with folks after a little bit more on the details of how to do this. But theoretically speaking, data doesn't narrow your choices. It opens your mind. Too often, I do this, my team does this, our clients do this. You look at a set of data and you see, oh, it spikes in June. Okay, great, that's it. I'm just going to increase my marketing budget in June. We'll decrease it in December. Great, moving on. Take a minute with that data and say, what is it telling me about people? What's the story that it's telling me about my product? Yes, I will always use that for my media purposes. But when I have a little bit of spare time, and I know that that's not very often, but when I have a few minutes, when I have a quiet Monday, I'm going to take a look at this data that I've got and see if there's any stories there. One of the things that I do that I know is very wasteful, but I do it anyway, is I print out. So you saw all those graphs. That's all. Google correlates, trends, search data. I just take screenshots, and I print it all out, and I go to a big table in a conference room, and I lay it all out, and I just start piling things next to each other that look like, those two things look like they might have something to do with each other. I don't know if they have something to do with each other yet, but I'm going to pile them, and then I'll look at it later. And then I get these weird series of interesting data points that sometimes lead to really, really strong creative ideas. Sometimes they lead nowhere, by the way, and that's okay. You will come to dead ends if you start practicing this kind of thing, and that's just part of the game. So, secondly, we humans still need to connect the dots. And this makes me feel like I at least have a little bit of job security. The algorithm cannot replace me completely yet. A lot of what we saw today, I strongly suspect when I explained what I was seeing in the data, some of you saw something very different in that data, that you could have gone down a totally different route that there's no way I would have ever thought of that would have come to an amazing idea, a really fascinating insight. You have to have those human synapses firing sometimes. Sometimes just the raw data doesn't tell the story. You have to have intuition, your cultural history, your personal history, the people you know, and it can really bring things together. So what is missing is as important as what is there. So when we looked at what kind of content is there, since there's so many questions about rosé wine, lots of people don't really know it, and we go to YouTube or we go online, we look at blogs, we look at publications and say, what's there? We focus a lot on what's there. It's always good to say, well, what's not here? Because those are great areas to play creatively, and frequently there's a lot of white space that you can take over and own. We need to go beyond the data for understanding. So this is me going down to the wine store and actually asking a living human being a question rather than just looking at my screen, which, trust me, is not natural for me to do when I'm working, but it was super helpful. I'll give you another example of this. One of my friends in New York is a very senior engineer at Google, and he runs the team that does Google Docs, spreadsheets, slides, that whole work suite. And sometimes things come into that where they add a feature or they add a button, and I'm like, what is that? And I click it, and it does something weird, and it makes no sense. And I said to him over lunch one day, I said, hey man, how do you guys, something had been added that I didn't get. And he was like, oh, no, the reason it's there is because the data shows us that the way that people use things. And I said, have you ever asked your mom if she could figure out what a button does that you make? And he said, no. And I said, try it. Because like your mom, I am not an engineer, and that data made sense to you, but the actual behavior sometimes doesn't. So data, yes, core, bedrock of everything that we do, but work with real human beings as well. Go to the stores that sell the product. Watch how people interact with it. Ask questions of your friends and neighbors. Look beyond your world. So this is our beer example. Again, I know that time can be very tight when working on projects and working on marketing, but here's a time to just take a few hours and look at those cousins instead of those brothers and sisters. All right, so I hope that after the conference today, you can all go have a lovely glass of wine or perhaps a beer. And I want to say thank you very much. It has been a huge pleasure to come down and talk to you guys, and I'm happy to take questions, and I'll be outside later.
Thank you, Brian.